So as we get to kick it off, I just want to welcome Sarah. She is from the Portsmouth Public Library today, and she's going to talk to us about bibliographic frameworks. Or we shouldn't be scared, right, Sarah? These are
No,
really
not at all. Not at all. It's
exciting.
it's very it's very mechanical. And
Oh,
so I'm in my happy place.
okay.
It is very mechanical. That's good. So I'm gonna need to share
Yes.
my browser and so if I pick this, so can you guys can see
Your PowerPoint
PowerPoint,
presentation.
right?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
can you also see all my Zoom links? Can you also see my browser? No?
No.
Uh, I want to do share. Oh, there we go. Can I do both? Can I do both? Entire screen. There we go. Okay. So now you can see my browser.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can see my PowerPoint.
Yes.
Radio. Okay.
Okay. Well, without further ado, we're going to pass it over to Sarah to
Mhm.
dazzle us with bibliographic frameworks. And thank you so much, Sarah, for doing this. We're
Oh
super
no.
excited.
Yeah, I'm happy to do this. I was just talking to my colleagues about how I signed myself up to do a bunch of teaching this year, and I'm so glad this is the last one because it does kind of encapsulate a bunch of things, and some of the things I really like about Koha is that it is mechanical. In some ways, it feels mysterious, but in other ways, it is very mechanical. If you check this off, it will show here. It might not, but if you check this off, it won't show here. Sometimes it will. I mean, but the idea is that it is very mechanical. Um, so without further ado, because I have a tight schedule for myself and it's already 2:04, that means I have to use, there we go. Okay, so I will be covering what frameworks do. Yes. My goal is to have you have something visual to go to get into your brain so you can run with it later and you can at least say, I've seen that. And most trainers do that where you just like, at least I've seen it. I kind of have this little niggling thing that says I saw that. That's the goal. So I will go by some things fairly quickly. Good thing about a recording is that you can watch me on half speed later on. Um, so I'm going to go over the typical situations that will make you say, oh, that's right. I need to use a framework. Oh, that's right. That was in a framework. Why is it in a framework? Doesn't matter right now. It's in a framework. Okay. And then I'm going to spend most of my time on what the slide says is the default framework, but that's where we're actually going to look at if I check this off, this shows. If I check that, it doesn't show. If I make it like this, it shows like this. So that's where I'm going to be spending bulk of my time. Um, and then we're going to talk a little bit about when and how to create a new framework. All that is like, oh, that's right, that is a good time for a new framework. The manual is fantastic. This is a really good part of the manual. It doesn't need to be improved, in my opinion. So, I mean, maybe it can be tweaked or something, but it's good. So, goal for this is to have the visual, and the manual will be that I can follow through. So, yay, rah for that. Not going to spend very much time on exporting and importing frameworks, but I wanted it to at least be in here as a thought. And then some extra stuff that just came up in the last couple of days, and there is a list of links at the end. So, yes. So MARC frameworks are format definition files for your bibliographic and authority records. They're just definition files. They're just like, you're allowed to use this field. When I use this field, it's going to show up like this. And so when I say uh, fields, that makes you have to roll back and say, oh, yeah, but what's MARC? So machine readable cataloging is what we're talking about. We're talking about, so I'll use terms like fields, indicators, delimiters, which is really just the symbol before the label of a subfield. So if I say delimiter A by mistake, that means I'm talking about the subfield A of a field. An indicator, I'll actually have to point at that. It's a little hard to describe without having an example. So when librarians say MARC, we're talking about machine readable cataloging, but we're also talking about MARC 21, which is an actual standard managed by the Library of Congress. And there are people employed to manage all of our librarian opinions about how the MARC standard works. So they published MARC 21 in like 1999. I think they were talking about the 21st century, not quite sure. And there have been 38 semi-annual or close to semi-annual updates since then. So right now we're talking about MARC 21's 38th update. So when we're talking about like, oh, it's MARC, it's the frameworks, it's whatever. Okay, so that's the librarian background of it. But what these MARC frameworks are in your system is your local validity rules. Okay. So there are two types, like I said, bibliographic and authority records. I'm not going to talk about authority records at all. There's like a mention of it later. They work the same way. We're going to spend all our time on bibliographic. I'm going to make somebody remind me to tell you exactly where to find those because they're not labeled the same way. And this is all required to do any of this manipulation. You have to have either superlibrarian or manage MARC frameworks permissions enabled. So, like I said, they set local MARC validity rules, local, hyperlocal. They do not change unless you change them. They don't get updated in upgrades. Um, they they can act on your records if you tell them to. So if you have a setting, there is a systems preference called apply framework defaults, where you could tell your instance of Koha to apply default framework or framework default values according to the framework that's already assigned to that bibliographic record. When you're cataloging new records, when you're changing the framework, when you're editing a new record, or when you're importing a record using Z3950. So you can have the frameworks act on your records or not. I don't. The only time I use it is when we're cataloging new records. So if I get a fresh record up, I want the defaults. That's all I want. But you can have them act on your records. It also can associate MARC fields with authorized values. So if you want a particular field to only be able to be filled in with a particular authorized list of words that you think are okay, you can set up that option from your MARC framework. And that could apply to things like a GMD, a general material designator in the 2245H field. Just throwing out words so people find that. They also customize the display of the MARC records in the advanced editor. The basic editor, it affects the basic editor a whole lot more. Technically, it affects display of the MARC records in the staff catalog, but only in the MARC view, which frankly I never use. And they are overridden by a style sheet. So if you are using an XSLT style sheet and you make totally changes in a MARC framework, don't be surprised if they don't show up in where you expect. I'm not going to spend a lot more time on that. Happy to talk about it later though. And in the OPAC, again, it affects the MARC view, which people might be more likely to see, but those are definitely overridden by a style sheet. Of course, when I was prepping for this, I found one totally affected the display. And I was like, okay, so this is your caveat. Your local settings are, I mean, like if mine doesn't work the same way, yours are probably not broken. They're probably just localized to you. Okay, so the times where you're going to realize, oh, wait, oh, shoot, I'm going to have to, is that in the framework? Oh, no. These are the scenarios. When you find yourself asking, why can I use a particular field in the advanced editor? I can type in any number I want, but but I can't do that when my colleague is using the basic editor. So the basic editor only lets you use what is defined in the framework. So it's because it's not in the framework. Why can I load a record Why can I bring in records that are not valid? But then when I go to edit it, it says it's missing an 005. Why did it load that? Well, that's because it's required in the framework. And when you're in the advanced editor, it's it's not checking your work. When you're in the basic editor, it will do the same thing. It'll say, hey, wait, you can't save this until you add an item type because that's required in your framework. And then you go like, okay, well, I've finally mastered this. I added another field to my ILL framework. And now it's like on 2 pages, and my ILL person does not want to do that. Like that doesn't make any sense visually. Well, there's a little thing in there that says managed in tab. We'll see that. So if you're saying, how do I make it appear or not appear? How do I change the row label? Why, like, can I make it required so they can't pass go without typing in a title? Um, how do I make a field? This is the doozy. How do I make a field appear or not appear or change the label for something on the edit item form? Who'da thunk? It's in the framework. Okay. Yes, a developer could change something with jQuery, but it's actually in the framework. Okay. Wow. Geez, time flies. Okay. So 213. Hey, I'm doing pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Okay. So the default framework, everybody says, don't delete or edit the default. That I had a conversation on the Koha Community Mattermost this morning and yesterday, and we're all like, huh? Not so much everybody does, but it is like if you find yourself saying, but I want my default records to do this, yes, people do actually edit the default framework. Um, the best scenario that I can think of that even librarians would break a rule for is to reflect changes published by the Library of Congress. That seems very smart. It also seems like the thing that people are least likely to do because they're very fiddly and sometimes there are a lot of changes. But so don't feel constrained by that. Just take the caveat. The caveat is this is most likely going to affect a lot of records. It may affect them exactly the way you want them to, but it's going to affect a lot of records. So go into it with a clear head and say, like, I really do need to add this field that is now valid according to the Library of Congress, and all of my records from OCLC are showing up with this invalid field. I need to make that field valid. That is exactly what you're supposed to edit the default framework for. Um, Okay, so that's my caveat, and then just don't delete it. Just don't delete it. Maybe you're really using all the books one or the more specific ones. Just don't delete it. Just don't do that. Okay. Copy, edit, just don't delete it. Oops. I'm supposed to click this demo button instead. Okay, so when you first land on the Bibliographic Frameworks page, this is what it looks like. And now it occurs to me I should tell you how to get there. So from your homepage, this is my test site. So I get to break all sorts of things. Um, so from your administration page, it's at the top of the cataloging section. And then we get back to that page. So I'm going to show you in the default framework. We have almost entirely out of the box. So when we got our installation in 2017, we got the default plus maybe acquisitions, models, CD-ROMs. There you will get, if you're a brand new customer, you have a set of things that may be useful to you. The ones we have added, and I'll talk about this after I go into other things more in depth, local basic records, ILL records, the FastAdd framework was in there, but we heavily customized that. The one that all of our records are on, and this may be the case for you, it may not be, is the default framework. Even if they're a book, even if they're a CD-ROM, we don't divvy them up like that. Some libraries do. Okay, so everybody's heads are over there. Okay. So when you get to this page, you say default framework. Oh, clearly I want to edit it. Well, how do I edit it? Like I'm on actions. How do I edit? There's no edit button here. If there was, you would be editing the description and the code. So to go in and edit the mark structure, you need to click on mark structure. And now I'm going to let this page sink in because there's 332 fields. This is a lot. It's okay if it feels like a lot. You can search for the tag you want, and it shows you everything that has the numbers 2, 4, and 5 in it. Always makes me laugh because I'm clearly searching for the tag 2, 4, 5, and I get a bunch of other stuff. But the one I want is right here. So that's one way to navigate. This grid also explains, like it gives you some of the fields that you can edit in this grid. Not all of them by any stretch of the imagination, but it's kind of a lot of them, like the most important ones. So in this title statement over on actions, you see edit tag. If I hit edit tag here, again, like the framework, I'm only editing the tag number, the 245, and the tag description. I'm not editing any of the rules inside that. So what I want to do is either use view subfields or edit subfields. When I hit view subfields, that feels safer. That's okay. You can still hit edit from here. You don't have to go back. Okay. Since I'm in the 245, that is the 245A is the main title. If I want to change the rules for that 245A, again, you see kind of the same grid. It's all smushed together in one column, but it's kind of the same grid. You can see a lot of things, but again, not by any stretch of the imagination at all. Edit. Now, this is the meat of the matter. When you select Edit 245A, you now have a chance to change the description in the staff interface. So you could do main title. You could have it say something else in the OPAC. You can make it repeatable, which title fields are not in this case, so I'm not going to say repeatable, but a lot of other fields, you could have multiple note fields. It's not repeatable. It is mandatory. You cannot pass go without entering a title field in the default framework. Is it important? I'm pretty sure all this does is put a little icon next to it. It does not mean that people using that framework can't save without entering that. It just gets a little icon. It is managed in tab 2, which corresponds to the hundreds. So in the 200s field, I'll show you more about that in a minute. Yes. So here your choices are, maybe I'll talk about it now. Ignoring or items goes in 10. Your default value could be plain text. It could be title. It's a little odd, but I could see a scenario. Give me a second, I could think of one. Max length is literally referring to how many characters, and I don't just mean letters, how many literal characters can fit in that field. So if you have notes fields or contents fields that are longer than 10,000, what is that? 9,999. If they're 10,000 or more, it won't save. It acts weird. And if you accidentally load one like that, you sometimes forget this is the reason why. Visibility. This is what I was saying, like it makes it visible in. So the OPAC, the staff interface, the editor, and that means the basic editor, or is it collapsed in the basic editor? The flagged checkbox here. I don't know why it's called flagged. I decided not to keep looking it up. What it does is it makes all of it unchecked. Maybe it's still valid, but all of it's unchecked. But this is far more typical. I don't think I have anything flagged. I'd be curious if somebody does. You want it to show in the OPAC? Yes. You want it to show in the staff interface? Yes. But keep in mind those caveats from earlier. Your style sheet will trump both of these. And I do want it to show in the basic editor. Do I want it to show all the time in the basic editor, or do I want it to um, show, but you have to click on something first to see it? I'm going to say yes, I want it to show. Your authorized values, um, anything that you have set up as an authorized value is fair game. So in this case, I have one that is, I'm totally going to run out of time. This is fantastic. I'm going to spend all my time here. Um, the authorized value that I will use is, ooh, where it is, suppress. So, and I wouldn't do this in the title field, but I would do this in, say, an item field, where is this item suppressed or is this bib suppressed? I would say, I just want like a toggle on, toggle off, suppressed or not suppressed. And those are the values that are in the authorized value that is called suppress for me, okay? Thesaurus applies mostly to authority records. And then I'm going to unselect this so I don't mess myself up. And then the plugin is very important. It affects the most important one that I can think of is the 005 plugin, which sets the last date edited for that record. Now we have the 005 field um, set as required, which is why I'm the one who ends up in my record going, oh, why doesn't it let me save it? Oh, that's because the 005 is required, but all I have to do is click and the plugin runs and I can save it. I don't actually have to type in the thing. So I showed you all of those options on one screen. So trust me when I say that the place where you would actually assign that plugin is on the field where it applies the most. I'm just felt I had to say that out loud. Okay, so where that plugin makes the most sense is here, tag 005, date and time of last transaction. Is it repeatable? No. It is mandatory, and yet somehow not important. Um, yes. So edit subfields. And it takes me down here where I have the plugin 005 assigned. So I hope that's a good enough like sense of like what it can do. Um, what they can do is also, I'm glad I typed up this page. So here's a good use for pages, by the way. So we have a local framework where I want somebody, mostly I'm the one who types this in, where I just want to land on something that has everything on one tab when I edit it. To assign the date and time of last transaction, I just click in there. I have PPL filled in as a default. I just type in my caps, and then here it already fills in local author. And then I add in these added entry. These are the biblio items. Yeah, these are the biblio items data that we also have required. So if I tried to save this and didn't have one in there, it would tell me that wasn't kosher. The other thing you might run into is when you want to do a new record and you are, say, your ILL person. I want them to go fast because we aren't loading records from anywhere. We are doing manual. We only do like 100 a month. It's fine, which is a lot for us, but yeah. So, but they type them all manually. I want certain things to show but not be required. So I want this to be here, but I don't want them to have to use it. I want everything to show up on one page, even though they have different hundreds places, right? And then I want them to be able to put in a note, but not have it look like it's required, and not even show up. So if I click on general note, so that's a collapsed field, okay? The next thing I want to show, like how hard stop at 2:30 are we? because I'm good. I just if we go over.
It's fine if you go over, Sarah. We're recording, so if anyone does need to
Okay.
leave at 2:30, know that
Okay.
they can get
That's
this
good.
recording on our
Yeah.
YouTube channel and the
Okay.
blog.
That's good. No matter how much I practice, I was like, I'm gonna go over. I'm gonna go over. Um, okay. So now that since I know that I've gone into my next slide, typical local frameworks, I already went over those. Your basic process is, I'm not even going to talk about it. Manual, go to the manual. When you export and import frameworks, the idea is, or why would you want to? You saw when I did that pull down menu, what you would want to do when you would want to do that is when, say, someone else has created an ILL framework and you just aren't going to create your own. You could say, hey, could you send me that file? And I'll show you what they look like just very briefly. Um, you can edit in a more comfortable format. It really depends. I thought that was fairly comfortable, but if you wanted to delete a bunch of fields or add a bunch of fields, that's tedious. Just constant clicking, clicking, clicking. And backups. Before you start to learn, save it, don't touch it, don't even worry, just save it. And then if you mess something up, then you just send it to your support company and say, "Can you put this back in for me?" And they will teach you how to do it. Um, my caveat about the format, I'll show you why. If you can export in either CSV or open document spread or open spreadsheet, something, ODS format. So if I do this and I export to CSV, and if then I open it in Excel, it may edit your data. And I can kind of guess how mostly it's going to edit, but don't risk it. So if I export to open document and then open my spreadsheet, so this looks like a lot, but when you see, it's all the same things we just saw, okay? It is displaying in a binary 0, 1, yes, no situation. And if you wanted to add or delete and you just knew that you didn't need any of these fields, oops, first you hit enable editing. Then you just say, nope, I don't need any of this stuff. Delete. And then you go back, well, then you save it. And then you go back over here and you hit import. Okay. That's the scenario I can imagine. And that's how I created my ILL form. I just said, let's see if this works. Okay. Then, especially if you do that and don't do it if you're a default, there is a Mark Bibliographic Framework test button. And it says you don't have any errors. I've never actually made it have any errors, so I'm kind of curious how you would have to break it. Like at what point you would lose the thread. Um, so the advice from the manual is run this after every edit. I haven't had to. Most of my records have answered that question for me. Um, so, wow, this is exciting. The extra thoughts came up because I asked a couple of uh, others in the Koha community, someone who's been working on updating MARC frameworks for those Library of Congress updates. Um, and so when you are first installed, you will get the MARC 21 version that was included in that release. I'm pretty sure you won't get the most up to date. Like if you start with 2311, you're not going to get the most up to date. You're just going to get what was installed with that. Good. I'm glad you're nodding, Kelly. You're going to get that package. So my test server is on 2405. So I was thinking, hey, maybe 2405 has the newest one. No, because we're an existing installation, nothing changes. So if you want to update your definition files, then you would have to go in and manually change those. You could do it maybe fairly quickly in Excel, um, but you would have to say add uh, the 300s that came with RDA. You would have to add this, that, and the other thing. Might be a bit tedious. Because of my conversations, I think we might have something brewing where we will be able to more easily share, or we'll just maybe put these out on the wiki or our files out on the wiki better. So there might be more sharing coming because of my prep for this, because I couldn't just work alone. Um, and what I'm referring to in my first bullet up there is that the MARC frameworks for authority records, let's get me back to that screen. They're right here under authority types, just a different label. I'm sure I could get somebody to change what that said. If it could say MARC Bibliographic Framework, could say authority MARC framework or MARC framework for authorities, but that's where they're hiding. They look exactly the same. So they just affect different files. Um, I think I'm pretty happy with that, actually, to get through all of that for you. Let me get back to my extra thoughts. So the resources that I referred to, so bibliographic frameworks in the manual, the wiki, it is one of the least populated file sharing parts of the wiki. There's like 5, and one says new stuff for RDA, and it's dated 2015. So yes, when I'm done with this, I'm going to put some of mine up there just as an act of goodwill. And like I said, I think we might get Caroline St. Cyr or Cyr LaRose on, to put one of the things that she worked so hard on up there. There's also, because I mentioned this to one of the Bywater staffers, Eleanor, I think it was, there's now a bug for more easily updating in existing installations. And so if you're interested in that, please do comment and show how you would use it, or how it's important to you. And the thread on Mattermost, which is, it has all of the previous players on it, Caroline and Eleanor, we're already talking. So if you want to jump in, oh, and Heather is also on there too. So I think we have some really great brains thinking about this. Um, Other than that, thanking those folks and thanking you for putting this on and for your patience while I just buzzed through something that is actually quite detailed.
I think that it's great to scratch the surface for anybody who hasn't
Yeah.
ever clicked that button and looked at those
Hmm.
frameworks. It's a great introduction. And
Hmm.
as you said, it can be rewatched at a slower speed if they want,
Yep.
or in your case, just like you did, ask questions, ask
Hmm.
people within the Koha community, ask their support company if they need assistance with doing any of
Hmm.
these. Um,
Yeah.
I think that this is a very large subject and you've tackled it very well, Sarah.
Thank you.
This
The
is
most
amazing.
reassuring thing I can say is when you click on delete, it really does give you a confirmation screen.
Yes. Good,
Like it was
good.
one of my first notes. I was like, the delete button, does it give a comfort? Yes, it gives it, you're fine. Whatever you do, if you have to delete it, there really is a confirmation screen.
Yes. Sarah, we
Oh,
did have a question and I'm not
sure.
quite 100% sure, so I wanted to ask you,
Hmm.
say I were to go in and completely delete in my default framework the 500A,
Hmm.
would my existing records within that framework already cataloged have their 500A deleted?
If you have what I'm pretty sure is the most common setup, where you don't have your syspref set to assign default values during editing. I don't think it would ever delete the data. That's my understanding. What it will do is the next time you go into that record, it would say, what's that? And again, I'm pretty sure it would only say what's that if you were in the basic editor. Now that actually is a good thing to test. I might test it now, where if you deleted it and you were in the, I mean, I have invalid fields in my advanced editor all the time because that's what we all use, and not everything's defined. It just says unknown field.
Mhm.
That's fine. But I wonder if it would display in the basic editor. So it depends on your habits and your staff's habits. So I wish I
Okay.
tested that. I want to know.
Yeah, no, and I've never thought about it in that
Yeah.
way because I lived by the
Yeah.
mantra, don't change anything in the,
I
or like, don't
know.
delete,
Don't
hide
delete.
things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
make those things not editable, hide
Mhm.
them. The other thing to note, if you do something like delete the 500A and then you import a record using Z39.50 or OCLC,
Mhm.
and you bring in a record that has a 500A, Koha will say, I have no place for you, and drop that field.
I wonder if it won't,
Hmm.
because like I said, I bring in things from OCLC that
Mhm.
have unknown fields all the time. And what I've found is that the only thing that it affects is that um, it doesn't know what to call the field. And
Yeah.
again, I'm in advanced editor, so
Mhm.
I would test that to be sure,
Mhm.
but I don't think it will actually delete your data.
Okay. Okay,
Unless
good.
you or Jesse have more wisdom than I do, I really don't think it will. Unless you have that syspref set.
That's what somebody just said in the chat.
Yes.
Lauren Denny.
If you have that framework default, apply framework default set to, sorry, I have my own little sheet here. When
Mhm.
importing a record via Z3950, that I all bets are off from Sarah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I am lucky I can play around in my test editor, so or my test site. So if you don't have a test site and you'd like me to try something, you just let me
Well,
know. And yeah.
this is why we have sandboxes or using
Yeah.
the demo site. Know that anybody can play around with any of these options within those, areas of the safety of, I'm not going to mess up my own data.
Yeah.
And in our demo site, it gets refreshed. So nothing that you do is going to be retained. So
Yep.
know that you have that.
Yep.
Um, Sarah, this has been fantastic. I
Oh, good.
appreciate you shouting out to all those that you talked to during this. And it just really resonates with the idea of Koha. You're giving back to the community
Mhm.
by creating this amazing presentation, but you're also saying, wouldn't it be great? And you're evolving Koha to what you
Mhm.
think would be, better for future librarians and current librarians using Koha. So you've really embodied the Koha
Thank
spirit.
you.
But
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Just dragging everybody down my rabbit hole with me.
They're all here. They all want to be a part of it.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm. This has been fantastic.
Yeah.
So again,
Thanks for
thank
this
you.
series. I've really enjoyed going back to find to see my, my the to pick a tone. I was really enjoying like watching the old ones. So
Oh,
it's good.
that's
Awesome.
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 Awesome. Okay, thanks everybody. Thank you. We'll send out this
Bye,
recording,
everybody.
post it, and we'll get Sarah's slides and send those out as well. So thank
Great.
you. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Have a great
Bye.
day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.